So I grew up on a farm. It was a great life. I had two older sisters, a younger brother. My parents were close. We were all close because we lived in the farm. My grandparents lived next door on a farm that had been in our family for 100 years. Ever since my great-great-grandfather came over from Ireland after the potato famine and bought this farm. And so we lived there together. And one of the greatest things about it was I got to be with my dad all the time because that's where he worked. And so I was home in the summers. We spent all our time together. I learned things. He taught me many things as a child. And everything on the farm was my playground. The barns, the sheds, the tractors, the creeks, the woods, it was all a playground for me. And because my grandparents lived so close, these cousins would always come, and we were a big Irish family, so we had lots of cousins, and they always show up, and I'd show them all the things that were fun on the farm to play. And I felt sorry for those guys because they lived in town or cities, and I lived on the farm, and I was so happy to be that. And then one night, one winter night, when I was 16 years old, it all changed. So I was at my grandparents' farm, which is where we milked our cows. They lived next door, so I'm in the barn. I would go over every night and help my dad get ready to milk, and then I would go feed the cows, and then I'd have some time to just hang out in the barn and daydream. And that's what I was doing that night, hanging out in the hayloft, daydreaming. When my dad flipped the lights on and off, which was my signal to come on down, and he was done, and we'd go home. So we lived about a mile away. So he did, but I get down to him, and he's bent over in pain. There's pain radiating down his leg. He's just like excruciating pain. He's like, get me home. So I help him in the pickup truck, and I get him in the car, and I drive him home. And I'm like just stunned because my dad was always like this rock of a man. He was like strong and there and so competent at everything. And so it was really, really scary for me. So I took him home, handed him over to my mom. She was a nurse, so she took over and like, good, it's not my problem anymore. I go to bed. Before I went to bed, she says, well, he'll either get a lot better or a lot worse, which was something my mother said, which I never thought was very helpful, but that was what she said. Well, it turned out he got a lot worse. And she woke me up the next morning at 5 a.m. And she said, Mike, your dad's worse. I'm going to take him to the hospital this morning. You got to go milk the cows. And I'm like, what? Like, I'm 16. I ride the bus to school. I don't get up at 5 and go milk the cows. That's not me. But there was nobody else. My sisters were at college. My brother was only 8. So I get dressed, go out into the cold winter darkness, and go to milk the cows. So I get to the barn, and without my dad there, it's kind of scary. You know, barns are kind of creepy anyway, and it's dark. But anyhow, I get going, and I go down, and we had 24 cows. So I open the door, and the first 12, you milk 12 at a time. They walk in, and they are all standing there. And what's supposed to be is they have these things called stanchions, which are like jaws that hold the cow in place so they don't run off. Well, only about half of ours worked. The rest of them were just rusty, and my dad didn't need it because cows behave for him. So I get them in there, they're all done, and I get the milking machines put together. The milking machines it's like a big tub that hangs under the cow, and with a bunch of hoses and pneumatic air and stuff, it mimics the hand milking of a cow, like we all know, and that's what the machine does. And then the milk accumulates in the bucket, and you take it off, put it on the next cow. So I get that all done. And to do that and keep all that stuff straight was kind of like a dance. And I'd learned this dance over time, helping my dad over the years when he'd be teaching me how to do this. And so I start doing the dance, and it's familiar, and I'm really good at it. I'm feeling really good. And then all of a sudden, the cows realize that I'm in charge and not my dad. And they're like, it was like when the a junior high class has a substitute teacher. And they're like, well, we don't have to listen to this guy. So one of them that wasn't hooked in just decides to leave, just backs out, goes out the door, knocks the door off the rollers. And I get that one back in. And then the next cow does the same thing, only this one's got a milker under her. And on the way out, the milk splatters, the milk's all over the ground. There's a big noise, all the cows are upset. Well, finally get it milked, finally get them all done. Took me like an extra hour that day than it should have. But at the end of the day, I roll open the door and the sun's up and it's just shining down on me. And I felt so great because I got it done. So I go to school that day. I get to drive the truck to school instead of the bus. That was cool. And I go through my school day. And after school, we go to the hospital. And at the hospital, the doctor comes in and says, your dad slipped a disc in his back. We're going to have to operate. And I'm like, oh, this is bad. So he stays there. I go home, milk the cows again. And it goes a little better. And the next day I get up and do it again. It goes a little better. So my dad has his operation. And in about a week, he's back home. But he's really kind of withdrawn. Physically, this is really taking a toll on him. And he's emotionally withdrawn from me. And so I kind of like want to talk to him about what I'm doing, but he doesn't seem very interested. So I'm still going to do the milk. I feel really alone doing it. And so all through January, February, March, 7 days a week, twice a day, I'm up there milking those cows. But it wasn't so bad. I got the hang of it. Eventually the cows, they started to accept me like I was top cow now. So they didn't cause any trouble. So I wrote my friends into helping sometimes. So, but then April came and it was time to do the cultivating. So I'd been driving a tractor since I was 12, but I had to do that, got all that done. And come June, crops are in, milking's down pretty pat, and then something else happens. My mother calls us together and says, we're going to leave the farm. We're going to move in town. And I was crushed. But despite that, and the reason was, they said, is that doctor said my dad couldn't drive a tractor anymore because of his back. It would hurt his back. It hadn't healed well enough. So we sold the machinery, we sold the cows, we moved in town. And I was sad, but that next year, my senior year in high school, I felt great. I felt like I'd accomplished such a thing. I was so full of confidence. I was a different person, stronger, more confident than I'd ever been before. And I've had that my whole life. But I never got the input from my dad. I never got the appreciation from my dad that I wanted. And although we had a great relationship through our whole life, this kind of lack of acceptance was kind of like a pebble that was always in my shoe, kind of always bugging me. In fact, at one point he even said to me, when I was trying to bring it up, he said, well, the reason we had to leave the farm is because you didn't get the cows bred. And I'm like, really? And it was true that we didn't get the cows bred, and you have to breed the cows every year because if you don't, they don't have milk. And we had them artificially inseminated. Well, I didn't know how to do that. That always happened when I was at school. So I talked to him about it once and he wasn't able to, he kind of wasn't interested in talking about it. And then I was kind of busy all that spring, and so I kind of let it slide. But then later he says it was my fault. So over the years, we get along great, but I want to have this conversation with him. And I never could have it. He didn't want to talk about this time in his life, I think, that was hard. And I was kind of fearful, like, what if he says something that hurts me again? I don't want to hear that. So it never happened. And then I was telling this story to somebody, a friend, and the friend said, at the end of the story, he says, well, you should talk to your dad about this. You should have this conversation. I said, no, this time's past. I said, my dad's 92. He's in a nursing home, assisted living. I'm not going to go have this conversation at this point. He said, no, do it. Be curious. So at the time, I would go visit him every Monday. We'd take a drive out in the country and we'd look at the farms and everything. So that next Monday, I took him out. We drove out to my grandparents' farm, drove in the driveway, drove right up to the barn. As we sat there for a while, we're talking. And then I was kind of fearful as I said this, but I said, Dad, you know, back when you were hurt, why didn't we get the cows bred? And I said that instead of, which I might have said at another time, why did you blame me for not breeding the cows? I said, why didn't we get the cows bred? I was just curious. And so at first he deflected and he said, well, it didn't matter. We were going to sell the cows anyway. Didn't make any difference. And I said, Dad, that's not true. A herd of cows that are bred is going to be worth more than a herd of cows, dairy cows that isn't bred. So that couldn't be the reason. And then he paused and he looked at me and he said, well, you know, Mike, I just couldn't handle it. And I was so struck by this admission of vulnerability of my big tough dad that I'd never got. I was just silent. And then he smiled and he said, but it all turned out okay, didn't it? And I said, yeah, it did. And so we drove away with me silent, feeling lighter than air.